If you still haven't ordered her Valentine's gift, don't panic. Just hurry and go to 1-800-Flowers.com to save up to 50% on beautiful premium roses. What sets 1-800-Flowers apart from the rest are their premium first-cut flowers, backed by their 7-day freshness guarantee, plus same-day delivery when you need them, right on time for Valentine's. This deal ends February 10th, so don't wait. Beat the clock and save up to 50% at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts, there's an old saying that power corrupts, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. But in American history, power has always come with a clock. No matter how beloved or successful a president may be, their time in the White House is meant to be temporary. And that idea, that even the most powerful person in a nation should eventually step aside, became law in 1951, with the ratification of the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It was the amendment that put an end to lifetime presidencies, born from the shadow of one man's unmatched legacy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We will finish today's episode with the history brief and a story from Bill O'Neill's Interesting Stories. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On February 9th, 1775, a British Parliament officially declared Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion. The move marked the final breakdown between Britain and its American colonies. On February 9th, 1964, the Beatles made their first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, watched by more than 70 million Americans. Story of the day. For the first 150 years of the Republic, there was no law limiting how long a president could serve. The U.S. Constitution, written in 1787, set the presidential term at 4 years, but said nothing about how many times one could be re-elected. The founders debated the very issue. Some favored lifetime appointments, others one long term, but ultimately they left it to the people. And then came George Washington, the first president of the United States. When Washington stepped down after 2 terms in 1796, he established an unwritten rule that no president should serve more than 8 years. His farewell address made it quite clear. The peaceful transfer of power was essential to preserving the young republic, he said. His successor, John Adams, followed the same example, and so did Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, and nearly every president after them. This voluntary limit became a sacred political norm, a sign of restraint, humility, and the faith in a democratic process. But like all traditions, it was only as strong as the people who chose to follow it. And in the 20th century, that tradition would be broken, but I wouldn't say out of greed, more out of necessity. The year was 1932. The United States was in crisis. The Great Depression had gutted the economy. Unemployment stood near 25%, and millions of families were losing their homes. Into this chaos stepped Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a man with optimism, charisma, and a message of hope: the New Deal. His leadership brought relief programs, banking reform, and infrastructure projects that rebuilt America's confidence. In 1936, he won re-election in a landslide. By 1940, however, the world was at war. World War II, to be precise. Nazi Germany had conquered most of Europe, and many feared that the United States might soon be drawn into it. As Roosevelt's second term came to an end, tradition said it was time to step down. But the people weren't all ready to change captains mid-storm. Breaking precedent, Roosevelt decided to run for a third term, and he won. Then, after Pearl Harbor in 1941 and America's entry into World War II, he ran yet again in 1944. And the American people democratically once more elected him to an unprecedented fourth term. It was a moment of unity and necessity, you might say. A people choosing continuity in the face of global catastrophe. But it also made history and raised some profound questions about power, democracy, and the limits of leadership. On April 12, 1945, just months after his fourth inauguration, Franklin Delano Roosevelt died in office. His successor, Harry S. Truman, inherited both victory in war and a political reckoning at home. For many in Congress, Roosevelt's 4 terms, though legitimate and arguably justified, represented a dangerous precedent. If one man could be elected 4 times, what would stop another from holding power indefinitely? The United States, after all, had been founded on rebellion against the very thing, meaning monarchy. And though Roosevelt had no authoritarian ambitions, although some newspapers did show him as a king, lawmakers worried that this example, his example, might one day be followed by someone who did. In 1947, just 2 years after the war, a Republican-controlled Congress proposed a constitutional amendment to formally limit presidential terms. The 22nd Amendment was very straightforward. No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected shall be elected to the office of president more than once. In simple terms, 2 terms maximum, or 1 full term if you're already served more than 2 years of someone else's presidency. Truman, interestingly, was exempted. The amendment wouldn't apply to the sitting president. But by then, he'd already decided not to seek another term. The amendment moved swiftly through state legislatures, ratified by the required 36 of 48 states on February 27, 1951. And with that, the long-standing Washington tradition became the law of the land. The debate over the 22nd Amendment reflected a much deeper tension in American politics, between stability and flexibility, between trust in leaders and fear of tyranny. Supporters of the amendment argued that limiting presidential terms protected democracy. They saw it as a safeguard against authoritarian drift, a guarantee that no single leader, no matter how popular, could dominate the political landscape indefinitely. Senator Robert Taft of Ohio, one of the key proponents, later declared, "The framers never intended for one man to serve for life. Our republic depends on the rotation of power." Opponents of the amendment, however, saw it differently. They argued that the amendment restricted the will of the people, that if voters wanted to re-elect a capable president during crisis, they should have the right to do so as many times as they want to. Some Democrats, still loyal to FDR's legacy, saw it as a partisan issue, a way for Republicans to ensure that no Roosevelt-like figure, essentially a Democrat, could ever rise again. Truman himself called it a bad amendment, saying it limited democracy rather than strengthening it. Even later presidents like Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton would express some similar frustrations, arguing that the restriction denied voters their freedom of choice. But despite criticism, the principle of limited executive power proved too deeply rooted in the American psyche to undo. Since 1951, every president has lived under the shadow of the 22nd Amendment. Some, like Dwight D. Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, and Barack Obama, left office with very strong public approval, prompting speculation about what a third term might have looked like. Others, like Richard Nixon or Jimmy Carter, found themselves struggling even to complete 2. And while no president has come close to overturning the law, a few have found creative ways to test its boundaries. Could a former president run for vice president and then succeed to the presidency? Well, the Constitution is unclear. The 12th Amendment says no one ineligible to the office of president can be vice president, but ineligible isn't actually defined. The question, I guess, remains a constitutional gray area. one that's occasionally sparked debate, especially when popular ex-presidents leave office. Still, the spirit of the law remains intact. America has stayed committed to the idea that no president should hold power indefinitely. The 22nd Amendment wasn't just about Roosevelt. It was really about redefining the presidency itself. It transformed the office from a potentially lifelong position into just a time-limited trust. It created a rhythm to American politics. 2 terms to lead, then step aside for renewal. The History Brief. The following comes to us from Bill O'Neill's Interesting Stories, published in 2021. The Disappearing Lake. Look at an old map of the world, and to the east of the Caspian Sea, you'll see a smaller partner lake called the Aral Sea, located on the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan today. The Aral Sea was once the 4th largest lake in the world, with surface area of more than 26,000 square miles. That's twice the size of Maryland. But from the mid-1900s onwards, the waters of the Aral Sea were diverted off to supply various irrigation projects in the Soviet Union in such a great quantity that by the turn of the century, the lake had shrunk to just 10% of its original size. By 1997, the Aral Sea was reduced to 4 separate pools, the largest of which was barely 1,000 square miles in size. The remainder of the lake had dried up entirely, its seabed becoming what is now known as the Aralkum Desert. There's hope for the future, however. After the Soviet Union dissolved and Kazakhstan declared its independence, the Kazakh government resolved to replenish the Aral Sea by building a series of dikes and dams directing water back into the Aral Basin. These projects are still ongoing, but the early results are quite positive. In the 5 years, waters in the northern section of what was once the Aral Sea rose by almost 40 feet, and the lake grew by more than 300 square miles. Thank you so much for spending some time with me again, and for helping make this humble little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying the show and would like to help out with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both of these links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized, so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.